Okay, welcome to this special City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. Before I explain what it is, it's February 10th at 11:07 a.m. Andy, would you call the roll?
Cobb.
Present.
Here.
Petrus. Larson.
Here.
Maddox.
Here.
Posh.
Here.
And we do have Petrus on Zoom.
Yes. So today we're here to be presented the Archer's salary and compensation study. And this section of the meeting will be about an hour. And then we're going to go into executive session to talk about a couple of development projects. So I guess who am I turning this over to first? Mayor, did you want to say anything?
I can say a few words. Excuse me. First, just for a little bit of background, we recognized quite a while ago that the 2018 salary study that we did is woefully out of date. And I think that's only been more clear since the pandemic and various inflationary pressures on prices, costs for people. And so we engaged with Archer Company to take a look at both market forces related to our labor costs and also sort of what the jobs sort of demand in terms of their not just market forces, but their complexity and difficulty to give us a bit of insight into how we might adjust in a more comprehensive way our wage and salary ordinance. And so we went through this process. I think Jim Battigallia is here to provide more information about their process and what they looked at and the results from their study. And so he's here to provide that presentation and then respond to any questions that you might have.
Yes, all right, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I am Jim Battigallia with the Archer Company. And we have been developing pay plans for public sector organizations for over 30 years. It is our primary function. And we, over that period, we have developed over 1,500 studies in 36 states. So it's kind of what we live and breathe, are evaluating jobs, conducting market studies, and developing pay plans for governments. And I am located in Columbus, Ohio. So overall, and this is with most all of our studies, our main objective is, as the mayor said, we want to establish internal equity by evaluating all the jobs so that we have a fair ranking of the positions within the city, non-bargaining job, and then to conduct external equity by creating and distributing a salary survey. And then, as we'll get into, we integrate the two to develop the pay plan for the city with city's input. This graph is an overview of the process. Number one, we first meet to understand what are the city's needs and objectives. We then go through the process of gathering data. What are your current descriptions? What are your budgets? What are your org charts? And then we had employees complete one of our, we call them our comprehensive position questionnaire. The questionnaires are reviewed by direct supervisors and department directors. We receive all those, and then we conduct our internal job evaluations based on our job evaluation system that will show a diagram of what that is. We then submit a ranking of how the jobs evaluated based on the questionnaires. While we're going through that process, we also met with the city to determine who are the competitive other organizations, and we've got a list of who all we surveyed, a list of benchmark jobs, which we actually attempted to collect data on almost all the non-bargaining jobs, but that was too hard, too big of a project. We ended up with collecting data on 47 jobs, which is a lot for the size of non-bargaining positions. We then integrate the job evaluations with the external market using linear regression analysis to develop a competitive pay line. We had discussions with city manager as far as what is the compensation philosophy of the city, which is to meet the market.
And when you say city manager, do you mean the mayor?
Mayor and city administrator,
Got it, okay.
yes. The objective isn't to lead the market, it's to meet the market. Once we have that pay line, which the regression analysis calculates, we then develop what is your pay plan, and again, we'll get into the details of that, and how many pay grades will there be, and how wide of a salary range. We then received and uploaded all of the non-bargaining employee data. We entered those into our system, and as we'll get into, and I think you all have already seen, what is the cost to bring all the employees into this new pay structure? And once you've accomplished that, now do you have money to move people into ranges that we would call pay plan progression, and also a way to ease pay compression, which is a very visible issue around the country right now, especially at the pandemic.
Could I just for clarification, you said you evaluated 47 jobs. How many actual employees are we talking about in those 47 jobs?
I don't know on the 47. In our plan, we have 114 non-bargaining employees.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you.
Okay, so that is all the steps at a high level. What's our process in developing the plan? Now we'll get into more detail. For the salary survey, as I said before, we had 47 benchmark jobs. And we initially started off trying to survey every non-bargaining job. But we wanted to make sure of ours that we collected data on that we have jobs from the very low ranking to the highest, that we have jobs that we can find in other city and county governments, that we have jobs across different job families. So we're really getting a mix of the overall classification structure of non-bargaining positions. We use, and here, this is a list of all the cities. You can see we focused a lot on Cleveland suburbs. We also have suburbs from Columbus, such as Dublin, Gahanna, Hilliard, Howell, Westerville. We went down a couple in the Cincinnati area with the Mason, Westchester Township. And then the rest really are here in the Cleveland area. And obviously all suburban organizations. Once we compiled all of that data, we supplement it from purchase salary survey data from the Economic Research Institute focused on Cleveland, and we filtered it for all industries. So we're getting a mix of private sector data in that data that we add to all of the other salary survey data that we collect. And we review that data for practicality. If we have a benchmark job where we're averaging around $60,000 and all of a sudden an organization gives us their pay at $100,000, we figure we got the wrong job here. So we do cleaning of the data. We try to do some follow-up discussions, but once organizations get the survey data, they don't like to give you a whole lot more. They're done with it. So we do our best to try to match apples to apples and compiling all the salary data. This number 35 is wrong. That should be 47. Oops. Let me come back here. How do I go backwards?
No, just hit them. There you go.
Yeah, okay. As I said before, so we had 47 benchmark jobs. The benchmark jobs did include directors, managers, supervisors, line workers, and overall, with the salary survey data, the city does lag the market, meaning most of your midpoints, we focus on midpoints of pay ranges. Your midpoints tend to be below the market. We don't focus on the actual salaries because there's too many variables. We could be surveying from an organization that has very senior staff, therefore they all make higher money, or the opposite. They could be newer employees and therefore they make less. We focus on the midpoints of salary ranges.
Makes sense.
So, let me see, did I miss one there? Yes. Let me go backwards again. This one?
Yep.
I'll get these right. Okay, so in addition, as we mentioned before, we evaluate all the jobs based on the questionnaires that the employees completed and the supervisors reviewed. Our evaluation system was designed for a public sector organization. And by that statement, I mean our evaluation system does not take into consideration profitability that you would find in the private sector. There is no profitability in government. So we use three work requirements: data utilization, human interaction, machinery, tools, and equipment. Those are our three driving forces to evaluate the job. Each one of these work requirements, we have what we call 9 degrees of difficulty, and those are predefined definitions in our evaluation system. We review the questionnaires and we see which definition that job relates to the most. So if we look at data utilization, buzzwords in that for different levels would be compile data, classify data, analyze data, evaluate, manage. So we go through what the essential functions are in a questionnaire, what type of data does the position receive, what type of data do they prepare. We review all of that to equate best to a specific level of each work requirement. We have the same definitions for human interaction. In human interaction, we have buzzwords such as communicate one-on-one with another employee, communicate one-on-one with the public, serve as a lead worker, serve as a first-line supervisor, a manager, or a director. So again, we have questions in our questionnaire that says, tell us about your communication. Do you supervise people? Who do you supervise? What level of supervision do you have? And so we actually read every questionnaire we get, and we take that information and analyze that to different levels. We then have machinery, tools, and equipment. Now we have one rating that we typically use for administrative jobs, and then we have other ratings that we customize for non-administrative jobs, public safety jobs, public works jobs. You're working out with heavy equipment in the streets. I mean, we look at all of that information. We ask, what type of equipment do you use and what do you do with that equipment? So it's a very thorough questionnaire. Once we evaluate 3 work requirements, we have what we call aptitude factors, and these can be related best to human aptitude factors. They're factors such as, what are your verbal skills? When we get into this part, it's really just checking a box in the questionnaire. We give different levels and the employee just has to check which box is most applicable. And for many of these, we ask them to give us examples of what they do. So we have mathematical skills, we have ADA issues such as we have here physical requirements. What is your dexterity? What's your physical? What are your sensory requirements? We have other factors such as what types of decisions do you make? What's the impact if you make an error on the organization, which relates to the reasoning and decision making? If you make an error, are your errors should your errors be caught by your supervisor, a director, or does no one review your decisions? We then ask about minimum qualifications, education, and experience. And then we finally then ask about the environment do they work in. Is it an administrative job? Are you out in the public? Would you work around sewer lines, water lines, et cetera? When we evaluate all of those work requirements and aptitudes, we get a subtotal of a numerical job evaluation score. Once we have that, we increase the evaluation points by responsibility factors. What's your span of control? What is your position within the city? Are you a line worker, a lead worker, supervisor, director? What type of budgetary impact? Which I think for Cleveland Heights, we really focused on the department directors for budget. And then what type of planning is involved with your position? We increase the subtotal of those evaluation points by the responsibility factors. They give us a total number of job evaluation points for each job. And that's how we establish the internal equity. And again, we submitted that to the city first to say, okay, give us your impact on how we've evaluated the jobs based on what's in the questionnaires. There are questions on that part? It's a lot to take in, but I know most people go, do you really do this every day? I had to say, yes, I do. So what we do to develop your plan, as this graph shows at a high level, we calculate job evaluation points for every job. We calculate average salary survey data for each benchmark job. We integrate those two through regression analysis to then give us the pay line and then work with the city to develop the pay plan. This is just a graph that shows what does the regression analysis look like. These are our sample benchmark jobs. In theory, you can see, here's our internal job evaluation scores. This is a draft. This is salary survey data. And in theory, the higher the evaluations, the higher the market data, the higher the pay should be for the job, higher the worth is to the organization. It's not a perfect world out there, so it doesn't always work out that way, but that's the theory behind it. When I first started doing this, as you can imagine, a lot of this, when we would get this, if you evaluated social workers, they require a college degree. They evaluate at one level, but the market data was low because it was, quote, social work. And so, you know, that's where our system is really a combination of evaluating jobs and comparing it to the market. Some jobs might have rated higher in the market, but they were only a high school diploma, and what we found is a lot of them were male-dominated jobs back in the day. So we helped alleviate a lot of those problems through our system. Okay, so for Cleveland Heights, we have 25 active pay grades. And how we develop these is we grouped, I think Addie distributed the pay table last week, right?
Yes.
So they're grouped in 50 job evaluation pay groupings from pay grade 1 up to 16. And then we stretched it out to 100 points. So once you started to 1,000 points, which is senior manager directors, Those jobs are assigned for every 100 points, which means you can delegate a lot of job responsibilities to those jobs, and they stay in the same pay grade. We have a 40% spread from pay grade minimum to maximum, which is fairly common in this part of the country. Part of that's because of the heavy influence of unions around here. They have smaller salary ranges. When we go down south and it's very non-union, they oftentimes have 50 and 55% spreads in their ranges. We then assigned every job to a pay grade, as they said, based on the evaluation points. City provided us your current non-bargaining employee payroll listing. That included the employee's name, what their current title is, the department, what's their salary, and when was their hire date for the city. We entered all of that into our spreadsheet. Every employee is assigned to a job title based on that information in the questionnaire. Their job title then looks up the pay grade and the salary range. We then will get into how we allocated them later, but we then shared that information with management directors to get their input. And we went back and reviewed some items because sometimes people may not be actually accurate in the questionnaire and it doesn't get caught. So that's why we go through the review process. Once we had that information, our first calculation we always provide is what is the cost if you approve the pay plan, what is the cost to bring all the employees up into the pay grade minimums? We had earlier on, we had some legal opinions saying if an organization adopts a pay plan, do all the employees have to be paid within that pay structure? And we had gotten legal opinions back when that yes, that's true. If you got a pay plan, you need to pay your people at least the pay grade minimum. That cost was not very much for the city of Cleveland. So you actually were paying your staff fairly competitively within our calculated salary ranges. So since that wasn't a lot of money, we then said, okay, now how do we address pay compression? And by that, we mean, do we have one person in a job title that has worked for the city, we'll say 15 years, and makes less money than somebody else in that same title that's worked for the city for 3 years? How do we correct that? So down below, I had to go into smaller fonts. We did a couple gyrations here. And again, as everything else, we had to fit within the city's financial constraints. So the decision on the report was, we're not gonna move any employees beyond the pay grade midpoints based on experience. So if you had 20 years experience and you're making toward the maximum of a pay grade salary range, we didn't do anything with them. We're really trying to address those people that currently make between the pay grade minimum and the midpoint based on years of service. And this is not, it's not a this is the right way or this is the wrong way. It's what fits for you. So we did a couple gyrations here. In compensation theory, you would say you should be able to progress to the midpoint anywhere from 5 to 7 years. Obviously, the less years to the midpoint, the more expensive it is. So we tried a couple costing scenarios. We even went out to be more conservative. We went out to 10 years. What's the cost if it takes 10 years to get to the midpoint, which is a lot of years, because the midpoint reflects the market. In the end, the city decided to go with 7 years to the midpoint, which is reasonable. And then our breakout, as stated here, is everyone goes to the pay grade minimum, and then you can see by the filtering here, if you're equal to or greater than 1 year, less than 2 years, you get the minimum plus 2.85%. And it goes up, minimum plus 5.7, clear up to 17.10. And then at greater than or equal to 7 years, you're at the midpoint. If your current pay is greater than the midpoint, there was no adjustment to salaries. But that fit into the financial budget for the city. The total to implement this scenario is approximately $277,000 in the first year of implementation.
Can you repeat that number again, please? 270?
277,000.
That's the difference.
Yes. And there were actually a couple departments that drove the cost more. One was because your people just were, current salaries were lower in the pay grades based on their experience. Planning was one. They had employees with low salaries based on the years of service. I'm trying to think of what there were two departments in particular, planning, and let me see here. I'll tell you in 1 minute. Finance. The current pay was low compared to their experience.
Yeah.
So those two departments had more, and also Public Works. Those were your three main departments, where the current salaries were low in our proposed ranges based on their years of service. Couple departments really received no cost based on this scenario. We only had one person in city council, the mayor's office, and law department. So you're paying them very competitively based on experience with the city.
Well, not according to her, but
No one in clerk's positions are paid appropriately, in my opinion, but that's another thing.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. You can ask my associations for that.
So with that, I mean, that's how our approach was for the plan. That's what we have for you as of now. And so the decisions then come into, do you adopt the plan? Do you implement this scenario? And then what else may you want to consider? Now, one of the things, several of the studies we do, thinking more long-term, again, what we're doing right now is addressing employees that currently pay below the midpoint or the market. And again, that's 277,000. So thinking long-term, what else can you do? What about all those employees that in our non-bargaining, we're showing 114 employees. This scenario gives increases to 43 or 38% of the non-bargaining staff. So what about the other 62% of the employees? One of the scenarios that different clients are doing is they're taking the ranges between the midpoint and the maximum, which is, we have how we calculate our ranges is we calculate the midpoint first. We reduce the midpoint by 20% to give us the minimum. And then we increase the minimum by 40% to calculate the max. So we could go into the midpoint and calculate, if you want to call it steps. You could do a 4% increase over the next 5 years. The difference that we're doing with a lot of our studies is because now we're going beyond the market, you only get those increases every other year. So that slows your budget as far as giving those increases. And when you think of retaining employees, you now have added 10 years, that they're gonna keep getting increases because you're allowing employees to go from the minimum to the maximum. It also helps you in recruiting because you could tell potential employees, here's our plan, here's how you progress. And the city does allow you to progress to the city max, but it's gonna take you 17 years. So you're gonna have to commit to the city for 17 years. And once you get to the midpoint, those increases are every other year. That's in addition to any COLAs you may offer. So that's just it's a scenario that we've been doing with several other studies that we're working with right now. So that would be another.
Excuse me, just 1 second, Mr. President.
Oh, yeah, well, are you finished here?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, before I get to Councilman Petrus, thank you for I have to tell you, this was fascinating to read for me. And I don't always say that about everything we're given, we have to read a lot of stuff. It was really very methodically laid out. I only glazed over a little bit when you got to some of the math stuff. And that was kind of towards the end of the study, because that's getting pretty technical.
Yes.
But I do appreciate all of that. I have a couple of questions that are kind of 30,000 feet. How long did this study take? You started when and you ended when?
We started, by the time we actually got started was last March, I think.
Okay.
Sounds about right.
And we came in with our recommendations in September with tweaking and finalizing in October, I believe.
Okay. And would it be possible to, in the appendix you have at the end here, would it be possible to interject in this table the current salary ranges, just so we have them right next to each other?
Yes, actually, yeah, that was one of our, we can revise our market report for that.
Okay. Because it's just, we could look stuff up and come back and look, but
Yes.
but if it was just sitting right there.
So we can do an elaborate spreadsheet. Well, let me put it this. We can do a spreadsheet typically that we would use the benchmark jobs,
Mhm.
which is gonna address most of the ranges. And then we would show, here's your current range, here's minimum, midpoint, max. Here's the market, minimum, midpoint, max. Here's our proposed minimum, midpoint, max with percentage differences between those. Would that
Yeah,
give you the
that'd be
information?
great. Yeah, that would be a nice apples to apples thing.
Okay.
So we have about 25 minutes for questions, Councilman Petrus?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Would it be possible to receive a breakdown of where the $277,000 would be allocated across the positions?
Yes, we have that and I can provide that. We have it
Great.
both by employee and then we have it by department. So I can
Okay,
send
great,
this
thank
on
you.
to the mayor, so you have all those. Okay.
All right. The other Jim?
Jim, are we making any other commitments beyond this first year of implementation for additional increases? So we have 277,000 to implement this plan in year one. Is there another number? Is there a further implementation in years 2, 3, or 4, or is that just what you'd be doing in a normal employee evaluation process?
Right, that 277 would be increasing the salaries, so you would absorb those into all future years.
Right.
Yeah.
But is there an additional increase?
Well, that's a decision for you all to make. That's what I was talking about. You could make a decision to address those employees that are between the midpoint and the max, doing a 10-year progression. You could also look at our scenario here and move people, or I should say, increase their salaries based on this experience level. we did this for implementation only, but you could use that for employee progression within the ranges.
Got it.
Again, that would be you all's decision on what is your payroll budget increase.
Other questions? Councilwoman Larson?
Thank you. As President Kuda stated, this is really, really so helpful and well laid out for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did you end up reclassifying any of our staff because of what you were doing with
As
looking at?
far as new job titles,
Yeah.
nothing's jumping out at me. Do you recall?
There were some sort of revisions of titles.
Okay.
Excuse me, nothing dramatic, nothing that would, I think, qualify as sort of a reclass or anything like that, but there were some adjustments to some.
Maybe in the administrative series, we usually do some collapsing in administrative, trying to make those more generically uniform.
Sure.
But Mayor, you actually did some reclassifying as we kind of, in the last 3 years. I mean, just kind of on your own.
We've created some new positions.
Right. But also reclassified. I remember there were some people that weren't assistant directors that are now.
Well, that's a different sort of situation. So the creation of the assistant director position that we did was sort of an organization-wide assistant director position. And then there were people that were promoted. That's
Okay,
different than
so-
sort of a reclass.
So, okay, got it, yeah. Other questions? Oh, please, keep going, yeah.
I'm looking at the ordinance and it talks about effective date. So it says talking about the majority of the benchmark, the effective date of each provision may be separately determined in accordance with the above. So will it be staggered or how do you see that?
Well, okay, so the reason for that, and there's an additional entry bit further up in the ordinance, if I remember correctly. That's because some things that, and this isn't for Archer, is that
Right.
the ordinance is sort of separate based on, but not completely exactly the same. The addition of that language and the language that is in the elected officials section relate to the specific requirements for elected officials versus the actual workers, the permanent part-time, permanent full and part-time workers that we would be adjusting the ranges for. So those changes will be separated out. The depending on how council passes it, we've got different, effective dates for legislation generally. But I wanted to make sure that it was clear that there are certain things that we would change immediately, and that would be the ranges for permanent, full, and part-time positions. That doesn't mean that the changes in salaries will occur, except for the ones that are then below a new minimum. But the other positions where something wouldn't change until after an election cycle, that's outlined in the ordinance as well. So that's how that's separated out. There are some that are by Ohio law mandated to occur later, and then others that we would, the salary ranges would be immediately effective if council passed it as an emergency or within 30 days if council did not.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You had a number of municipalities that you used in this study, and I've never looked at the salary data. It's just been my belief that those communities that have a higher per capita income tend to pay their employees more. Is that borne out by the studies that you've done for other municipalities?
So when we've got 15, 16 organizations, and what we did in identifying the organizations is we went in and did a comparison of each one. What is their salary, what's the population, and what's the average income for that city? So I'm gonna say it doesn't always spell out exactly that way. You would think it would, but that's not always the case.
Okay. And in your master report, you reference several detailed reports that would highlight the potential payroll costs.
Yes.
I'm assuming that's something that you've already provided to the administration.
And I can provide that, an updated listing for all that.
Okay, because I think that's something we'd like to see
Okay.
the total impact on that. And then you mentioned financial constraints in your report, your recommendations within that. What financial constraints were you asked to use?
Our first implementation costing, we did do an initial costing, I believe, clear out to the max. And it came back over 600,000, and we kind of said, okay, that's too much money. We can't do all that. So that's why we came back, recalculated, and stopped at the midpoint.
Okay. And then on your chart, or at least the chart that is, I think, going to be part of our ordinance, we have the various salary grades, and it has an annual and it has an hourly. We're not proposing to change any of our salaried employees to hourly, are we?
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
So we basically have either exempt or non-exempt employees at FLSA, exempt or non-exempt. But basically what we wanted to do is provide both ways of looking at it. So it's the annual salary divided by 2080 in order to get the hourly. And that's pretty much it. We just wanted to provide both ways of looking at the salary data. And there will be some people who are in permanent part-time positions as well. So taking a look at their hourly data would be important for that. It would also be important for people who are, calling off X number of hours for, vacation or sick or something like that. Excuse me.
And then it appears that we're proposing that for our permanent regular employees, the minimum salary is going to be $16.34.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to be raising the salaries of those that are, we talk about a living wage or at least a minimum wage of 15.
Right.
All right.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
just for additional work on that, this does not, and you'll see in Exhibit 3 for our seasonal employees, we didn't do an analysis of our seasonal work. But since the bulk of these salaries, the bulk of our expenditure is going to be in these permanent part and full-time positions relative to our seasonal employees, we wanted to start there, and that's what Archer looked at, was the permanent full and part-time positions. The seasonal salaries, I did not make any changes to, with the exception of formatting into a new form and with the possibility of an exhibit that would be separately posted publicly so that people could see it in a more digestible way. But all of the seasonal employees, those positions, I did not make any changes to relative to the wage and salary ordinance. But that's a discussion that we would probably want to take up at some point to see if there's any need to move that forward, either from a market perspective or some other perspective.
And we usually consider seasonal as what you can get for it.
And some of those seasonal positions, because they're classed differently by law, by federal law, some of those seasonal positions are paid on a weekly basis as opposed to an hourly basis or something like that. And so that provides a bit of a different lens to look at it through that doesn't really match well with our either salaried or hourly wage employees.
One other question. Did your, in running the final report and recommendations, did you take into account those situations where a salary adjustment will have to be made because someone is holding a supervisory position and someone underneath them is going to be raised?
We did not do a separate comparison, but I'm hoping with doing these compression adjustments and again, if you're mentioning non-bargaining to bargaining, we did not do a separate study on that. If that's what you're really asking about. I would think if it's in the non-bargaining, the evaluation of the supervisor is gonna place them into a higher pay grade. And if there is that compression, even after what we did, it's because that lower level employee potentially has been with the city for 25 years and you have a newly promoted supervisor. That's typically what we're finding.
Okay. Thank you.
That's really an interesting question that brings another question to my mind, but go ahead, Councilman Posh.
I have a couple more questions. So were salary and benefits reviewed in this?
This is strictly base salary.
Base salary, okay. Is there any, I do know some cities pay, I don't wanna say bonuses, but there's usually another term for that. But was that ever looked at? Is that something that's ever been in the horizon in Cleveland Heights?
Yeah, we did not solicit pay practice of the other organizations. Again, it was base salary.
Okay. In the final report, it references an exhibit 4. Can we,
Those are posted
where?
on the civic, on your board portal and online
On the board portal.
and on the city's website.
I just have what was emailed to us. Okay, I'll have a look at that. Is it what's under today's meeting
Yeah.
in Civic Plus?
Yep, yeah.
Okay, I'll have a look at that.
Other questions? So let me follow up on Councilman Petrus, Posh's. So benefits as a percentage of overall compensation, you didn't look at that.
We did not, no, it's just
Okay.
base salary.
I guess because that's such a key factor in, our budget, our overall budget, how would you suggest a city take a look at that? What would be a
One thing we could do, and let me tell you that in Ohio, because we have state systems, the PERS is all the same. A lot of these core benefits are very similar. There's not a lot of difference.
Yeah.
Where we see the difference potentially then is to what is the employee and the employee shared medical insurance.
right?
That would be one area that would then, go over into, medical, dental, vision. And unless you're gonna say you pay for all the employees' medical benefits, 100% of the cost, they're gonna be fairly comparable. The other reason we don't typically, they don't impact pay is because as an organization, you can change that in 1 year. This is what you pay now. We're having budget problems. You now have to pay an extra $150 a month.
Right.
That's why we don't put it into the compensation. So what we've done on several things is we can do a separate study. It's just more factual. Here's what these other organizations offer. And it's just we're not benefit consultants, so we wouldn't be telling you what to do. We can just show you what the other folks have. And again, when you get into vacation and, everybody offers 15 days of sick leave, we're very similar in the government world in Ohio.
I mean, I'm not gonna belabor this, but I will say that I've seen as much as 15% difference in municipal entities when it comes to the benefits as a percentage. So I would say it's generally close, but not always.
Yeah.
Cause I've seen with my own eyes. Gonna be delicate here. How many positions were we paying above that median sweet spot? Not naming the positions, but what do we?
I'm gonna say there were, I believe, and I'm looking at market to our proposed,
Right,
there were I think only 2 jobs that the
Okay.
proposed
I figured.
came in at 10% over the market. Out of 47.
Right.
Not many.
Negligible.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Councilor Flash.
Okay, so now I'm looking at the, in the packet versus what was emailed to us. And there's a table with a red heading that basically says job title, market midpoint, proposed midpoint.
Correct.
Can we see what the current midpoint is?
That's the expanded, I'll provide
Is
that.
Okay.
And
is
we'll
that
do it so that you can see the minimum, the midpoint, the maximum. Here's your current structure, here's the more detailed market data, the more detailed proposed with variances on each one.
Yeah,
So
so,
we'll work on that.
yes, I don't wanna name names for particular positions, but I see a market midpoint of basically 106,000 and the proposed midpoint is 90, so it goes down 85%. You know, and it's a significant position, one that's, you know, hard to staff. So what I'm just kind of curious to see, I mean, okay, so we have some proposed midpoints. I just want I'm looking for clarity. I mean, we've set the proposed midpoints to be in line with our budget, with what we feel like we could afford. I guess what I'm worried about is we're gonna implement these and then throughout the year, we're gonna find various people within our organization that is gonna say, well, I shouldn't be at the midpoint. I need to be at the highest of the midpoint, just so I can get to the market midpoint. Otherwise, we lose them, and you know, the whole point of this is trying to make sure that we're competitive.
Sure, and I'll look at that one.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? This has been very enlightening. And again, I really appreciate the clarity of this document.
thank you.
It was easy to follow and methodical, and it's a great place for us to, you know, reference. And if you could follow up on those
Absolutely.
few modifications, that'll help us. Certainly appreciate it. With that, we'll go into executive, is there a motion to go into executive session? We're not just gonna do it.
I move that we go into executive session to consider the lease or sale of city-owned property.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Andy, call the roll.
Sorry. Cobb,
Aye.
Kuda,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Maddox,
Aye.
Osh.
Aye.
All right. And with that, we are heading into executive session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're coming out of executive session at 2:08, and being no further business before this committee, this meeting is adjourned.